Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today our topic is red herrings and dead cats in diagnosis, or what's really going wrong, and does your doctor really know if they're after the right thing? The difficulty of diagnosis is being distracted by things that may not be important, but they seem important. The term red herring, I was able to find the first reference of it in 1420 with regard to a smoked red herring fish that smelled quite fishy in Britain. And then later in 1686, there was a reference to fox hunting. And if you wanted to prolong a fox hunt, you could drag red herring across the ground to distract the dogs so you could prolong your fox hunt. And if you didn't have a red herring or smoked herring, you could drag a dead cat instead, and that would extend the fox hunt by distracting the hunting dogs. This term has been used in medicine since between 1686, well, it was first used in 1686 with regard to fox hunting, but it was started in medicine in 1800 or so. And the idea is that there are distracting things that may be very promising or that may be very stinky and smelly in the sense that they really attract you as the cause of disease, and they may not be involved. This is kind of what Dr. House did in the House shows, trying to look at all the different possibilities. So when you're trying to figure out what's wrong with you and when you're trying to understand the root causes of everything, you want to first brainstorm, like the Disney group said, and really let every crazy harebrained idea come into your head and write them all down. And don't block them. Think of everything that could possibly tickle your fancy, anything that could be a problem in your mind, and write it all down. And only then, after you've collected every crazy idea, then you start to whittle them down and think which ones are more or less likely. But a red herring and a dead cat is the concept of something that seems really interesting, and it may not be the root cause of the problem. In fact, I submit to you that in modern medicine, a lot of the things that we chase down and we stifle with medicine is really not the root cause. It's really a red herring. For example, there's a trend in mental health that I hear quite a lot, which is symptom management, or the patient is well managed, or the patient is medically managed. What that means is that somebody has wrestled and wrangled them using medication so that rapidly, as soon as their symptoms appear, they squash them down, and they consider that medically managed. And it may be good in that a person's got their symptoms under control and they don't allow them to flare up and take over burning the whole house down, metaphorically. In this effort of squashing symptoms as soon as they show up with drugs, we end up getting farther and farther afield from the very root of the problem, which is often some root cause that is not addressed by the drug. So every time we tamp down a symptom with a drug, we can pat ourselves on the back intellectually for controlling the symptom and preventing somebody from suffering, but we're getting farther and farther from the root cause. So I submit to you that we might really have to look at some things. Let me name some of those things, and these are the things that I consider to be more red herrings in general than the actual root causes, and they may surprise you. The first one is parasites. There are various parasites and gut flora problems that happen in the human body, whether it's in the mouth or it's in the guts or on the toenails or it's growing in your sinuses. These are, I think, not the root cause of most problems, and going after them and trying to kill them with antifungals and antibiotics is really not the way to really get at the deep root causes. Some of you may vehemently disagree with me, and I'd like to hear your comments, because some of you have gotten better by combating those bugs with antibiotics and antifungals, and that's cool, but I don't think it really gets to the root cause of the problem. I would like to starve those little buggers and get them out of there. And that really fits for infections too. If you've got infectious problems that are really flaring their ugly head and you're getting infections and fevers, signs of inflammation like redness and heat and swelling and all that, then you may need to stop the infection to prevent sepsis and prevent dying. But really, generally, recurrent infections and chronic infections are not life-threatening, and they don't need to be beaten down with drugs. They usually need to find the root cause, which is nearly always some kind of carbohydrate or body imbalance of diet and life balance of stress. The next one is really cancer cells. Cancer cells of all types, and even benign skin cancers, which we see quite a lot of. These things are a distraction. They're not the real cause of the disease. The real cause is in the metabolism. It has to do with oxygen, it has to do with glycation, and the damage that happens to cells due to burning of sugars and excess sugars. I think it's important to look at inflammation, and I think it's important to look at pain as also distractors. And I think that the lipid panel, the cholesterol, is a real problem. Looking at viruses and struggling to get a PCR count of which virus I have and how much of that virus I've got. It really isn't the cause of disease or the cause of death in most people. And even I'll go as far to say that in pandemics, the rate of infection is not the real problem. I think it's really the rate of public health, the rate of nutrition, the rate of detoxification, the rate of toxic chemical poisonings, the rate of cleanliness and human waste from history. And I also think that adrenal dysfunction is a distraction. It's not the root cause. So if you're going after that long list that I've just named for you, it's probably not the root cause, and there's probably something deeper than if you say take a remedy for parasites, a remedy for cholesterol, a remedy for inflammation, a remedy for cancer, a remedy for infections, a remedy for adrenals. I don't think that's the root cause. I really don't think. I think all of those things are results of something deeper. And so you might ask me, what is deeper, Mike? What do you think is deeper? And I'm going to tell you that I think that I'll start with toxins. There are man-made toxins, human-made toxins, and there are also some environmental toxins that are made by nature. They might include mold or heavy metals that come from the earth. They might include pesticides, herbicides, fire retardants. These are things that can be tested for in the urine and other sources. And I would look to the complete blood count to look at the cell counts and the differential counts of what kinds of cells are overworking or underworking. I might look at the biochemistry profile to look at the enzymes and understand the organs that are at play. And many of you may not know that there's a few enzymes that we can look at that when they're elevated, we can actually look for a breakdown of isoenzymes, which are 4 or 5 different breakdowns of different kinds of these isoenzymes that can be used to figure out which tissue or which organ is the problem. Another thing that I think we can do is we can look for self-antibodies. These are antibodies to self, meaning antibodies to your own thyroid, antibodies to your own heart valves, antibodies to your myelin or your oligodendrocytes, antibodies to your peripheral nerves or your striatum and your basal ganglia of your brain, anticerebellar antibodies, antibodies to ovaries or testes, antibodies to islet cells or beta cells of the pancreas, antibodies to joint tissue, rheumatoid factor. These are all the classic antibodies that people look for, anti-nuclear antibodies, the ANA titer, rheumatoid factor, Sjogren's, and other autoimmune factors. I think that it's important to know that the total IgG and IgA and IgM and IgG, AGE and M, are the most important thing to look for to make sure that your body is making enough of a class of these antibodies. I do not think that food antibodies are the most important or that environmental tree airborne antibodies are important. For example, to find out if you've got antibodies to gluten or dairy or corn, I don't think that's as important. And I also don't think that antibodies to tree pollen and antibodies to mold are as important as these other things that I'm listing right now. And I think the reason for that is that those are results. They're not root causes. Those are a response of the body. They're not a root cause. It's important to know that lectins there's no lab test for. Carbohydrates, there are lab tests for, and there are things like, insulin and fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, HOMA indicator, the HOMA ratio. It's also important to look at oxidative stress. There are some lab tests in urine that can be measured of oxidative stress. That's a huge factor in a lot of problems. So I think you need to know that many times we're dragging a red herring, a smoked herring, or a dead cat across the path of the bloodhounds to try to find the fox during the fox hunt. And if we can realize that some things are more important than others and that they're the root cause of others, then we won't fear infections and we won't fear pandemics and we won't fear plagues and we won't fear degenerative diseases like MS and lupus and other things if we understand what the root cause mechanisms of these things are. And we measure them and we look at them scientifically. The ones that we can't measure, we do elimination diets for. And we understand that we need to reverse these and that it's possible to reverse most chronic disease. We're not talking necessarily about acute disease, although I do want to attack pandemics in this video because I do not believe that most pandemics are purely and simply infectious spread from person to person. There's much more going on than just the virulence of the bug. There's a lot more to the terrain. That is red herrings and dead cats in diagnosis.